What is going on, guys? TheBrokenMachine here. Hope you guys are all doing good today. In this video, I'm bringing you guys a guide to improving your aim with a controller in Battlefield 1. Now, a lot of this will apply to other games, so if you don't play BF1, do stick around, you may learn a thing or two. Okay, firstly, if you're using a television and not a monitor, go ahead and look through the settings, find the picture or scene options, and choose game mode. What game mode essentially does is it disables any extra image processing options on your TV, which can reduce input lag. Input lag is the delay between the television or monitor receiving a signal and it being displayed on the screen in front of you. The less, the better, and more responsive the game should feel. Secondly, one thing you can do to drastically improve your aim is to become more aware of where the center of your screen is. Knowing this will allow you to quickly snap to and follow targets. So what I'd recommend is, at the start of every game, aim down sight, there's your center. Do this on every spawn in every game until you just know where it is without even having to think about it. Thirdly, at all times, you should be questioning where you're aiming at and why. Why are you aiming at the floor? What's so special about this window, this room, this door? You need to be constantly asking yourself this. Why are you aiming at a particular place? Do you really need to aim there? Why not somewhere else? Let's have a look at a common situation to show you what I mean. This is a building you'll see across many maps. Usually, an enemy will be on the stairs here and one looking down the stairs. So if you walk in aiming with these spots in mind, you'll be more likely to see them first and hopefully win the gunfight. But if you come around the corner looking at the floor, you'll have to adjust your aim, and the extra time it takes to do so will be more than enough for your opponent to take you out. Getting the idea that you're always aiming into your head isn't too much of a difficult task. The point though is to make you more conscious of what you're doing. If you're more conscious of where you're aiming, you're likely to be more better at it. So every game you play, keep it in mind. Where are you aiming and why? What are you hoping to achieve? Next, let's have a look at settings. Highly recommend turning uniform soldier aiming on. What this essentially does is make all sights feel the same in terms of sensitivity. So if you aim 90 degrees to the left with a pistol, then switch to an SMG and do the same, they should both feel exactly the same. If you do decide to use uniform soldier aiming, make sure to go into the advanced options and set all zoom sensitivity settings to 100%. Also here, I'd highly recommend you turn off vibration as well. In my opinion, it's totally unnecessary and it must have some effect on aim, especially when you're sniping at those longer ranges. Any little vibration is obviously going to have some effect, so definitely recommend you turn that off. When it comes to sensitivity, there is no perfect setting here, only preference. I use 100%, but I wouldn't recommend that for any new players. Somewhere between 30 and 50% should be more than enough. Obviously, it's much easier to stay on target with a low sensitivity, but you do lose the quick reaction time that a high sensitivity can provide. However, if you do decide to go pretty high, do remember it is very easy to over and under aim. Try to keep that in mind. As always, I do recommend you use what you find comfortable and don't constantly change your sensitivity. That is such a bad habit that so many people do. You know, remember people, it's all about that muscle memory. If you're constantly switching it up all the time, you'll waste hours and hours of gameplay. Don't be one of those players. Keep it the same, get confident, and then change it later on. As for soldier zoom, I use 100% again here. That means my sensitivity while aiming down sight is the same as the hipfire sensitivity. If you want it feeling similar to Call of Duty, where aiming down sight is slower, then drop this down to 50%. For new players, I'd recommend leaving auto rotation enabled. Having this on will help you to snap to targets. Personally though, I do have this off as I prefer to be able to aim where I want to. Often auto rotation will aim at the waist in a situation where I need a headshot to survive. It's definitely great for the new players, but after a while, I'd recommend turning it off. I'd also recommend leaving aim assist slowdown on. This will slow down your sensitivity when there's an enemy in your sights. For most situations, this is going to help you, but you may be at a disadvantage against multiple opponents where it slows down and you can't really pull it off because it wants to kind of stick to one of the opponents. There are many players out there who play with aim assist off completely, but if you're new to the game, I wouldn't recommend that, and personally, I just prefer slowdown on. You know, the frame rate isn't always consistent, and you've got VSync kicking in as well, so I much prefer on console to play with just slowdown. Next up, we have stick aiming acceleration. I have this on 0%. I do not want any acceleration on the sticks. So if you guys set this to 0, if you snap to one side, on screen you will see the exact same movements. With this on 1% or higher, there will be added acceleration and your aim won't be as snappy or precise. If you've had acceleration on all this time, I'd highly recommend you turn it off, suck for a few days and get used to it. Acceleration, in my opinion, is never good. Highly recommend you just get rid of it. Next up, we have the dead zone settings. The dead zone is basically the area around an analog stick center position in which the stick will not send any information to the console. So if you have this on high, the controller will not respond until you push the analog all the way. Personally, I have this on 11% for both sticks. I'd recommend somewhere between 10 and 15%. The default is 22, and I think that's just a little bit too high. If you go too low though, your aim may drift all over the place and be quite uncontrollable. Leave the actual dead zone and max input threshold on default. I had a play of these and found the default settings are perfectly fine as they are. If you do change it up, you'll notice your aim will probably go all over the place, so I wouldn't recommend that. Next up, we have the max input threshold for the triggers. I'd recommend dropping these all the way down to 5%, and your trigger to aim and fire should be more responsive. Also, to add to this, I use L1 and R1 to aim down sight and fire my weapons, same on Xbox. If you want to use these buttons as well, just go into the custom button remapping in the menu and change these over. Definitely recommend doing this, they're so much more responsive and much more easier to use. Also, one last option to change here is the screen shake scale. Recommend you drop this all the way down. Less screen shake means easier aiming and staying on target. No need for this to be on 100%. Maybe if you're playing the campaign, but for multiplayer, drop this all the way down. Also, if you want a more responsive experience, I'd recommend you use a wired controller. With Xbox, this is as simple as plugging one in. On PS4, you'll need one of the new V2 controllers and setting it to play over USB in the options. It may not be a huge noticeable difference, however, there could be moments where Bluetooth interference affects your aim and button presses, so definitely would recommend playing over USB if you can. Now let's explore aim in more detail and suggest additional ways in which we can improve it. Now aim can be broken down into 4 categories. Firstly, there is tracking aim, where you track your opponents and aim accordingly. Secondly, there's snapping to targets, your reflexes basically. Thirdly, pre-aiming. This is your crosshair placement. And lastly, a huge part of good aim is gun control. Now these are not necessarily separate, but by breaking them down into these categories, you can see which areas you may need to improve on and where your weaknesses may lie. Now tracking aim is the easiest to improve on. If your sensitivity is too high or too low to follow a target, then you need to adjust these accordingly. For example, if you're using 50% sensitivity and you're constantly over aiming, then drop it down by 10%. Before changing though, do ask yourself, is it you that's not able to follow the target, or is it the sensitivity? That is a question only you can really answer. Be honest, don't lie, just be straight and honest with yourself, but don't adjust straight away. Always take a step back. If it's you, that's something you need to try and improve on. But if it is the sensitivity, then adjust it by 10%. Now improving your tracking skills isn't just about sensitivity though. You need to learn the game mechanics and where players are likely to move. This requires observation on your part. In every game you play, you want to be taking note of how players move. More specifically, how fast they travel across your screen, how quick they may go from crouch to standing, how quick they can slide, basically everything about the way they can move in game. And the goal is to use that information to be able to visualize their movements in advance. Now, if you can do that every single game, eventually you'll just know how players move and you just won't even think about it, and your aim will just be able to track targets with ease. You know, at this point, I don't even think about it anymore. I see a guy, I see them running, and I aim. That's the goal that you want to be at. That's what you want to hope for. Tracking is part of good aim, but you know, the real key is the visualization. By knowing the game mechanics, you'll be more able to accurately predict where they may go next, even down to the frame. So by learning the game mechanics and where players are likely to go, you'll have more information to work with when visualizing your opponent's next moves. Now, I'm not suggesting some scene from The Matrix or anything like that, but just think of it like this. For example, if you're firing at someone running towards a building, they're likely to enter it, so be ready to aim accordingly. You know, we could sit here and analyze player movements by the pixel, but that's just a bit pointless. It's just something you need to do, and you learn best by doing that. So don't be afraid of missing, just go for it and just aim. The key is to anticipate and aim. Don't think too much about it, just do it. Basically, the goal as well here is just to get into your opponent's head and be prepared for where they will go next. You know, that I don't know your skill level, so that might sound like way off, but it's not really that difficult. You know, my advice is just take notes and visualize. You know, just, take note of the game. Okay, next up we have snapping aim. Now this, I think it is quite a difficult skill to learn. My advice is to snap for the waist or upper body if you're a fairly new player, or just getting to grips with the game. You kind of get it, but perhaps your snapping aim isn't that great. And snapping for the head is only really necessary for snipers. You may want to do it if you're on low health or you think the enemy, a headshot may, get them, but headshots are risky, and in Battlefield 1, unless you're sniping, I don't think there's much point. You may as well just go for the upper body. But if you're one of those players who does want to go for the headshots and snapping to them, it's all about confidence. Don't think too much about the snapping and just do it. Start with the larger body parts if you're rather new. The waist is a good place to start, then the chest, and when you do get better, go for the heads, but only when necessary. I cannot stress that enough. If you watch my gameplay, I don't go for headshots a lot unless I'm sniping, because it's kind of pointless. I mean, if you're point blank, fair enough, go for it. But if you're having to think about the aim, if you're at a distance where, you're having to, just take a moment, then you probably, it's probably not a good idea unless you're sniping. When it comes to aim, we always think about these things about visualization and your ability with the sticks, but it's also about your mindset. And again, confidence. It's all about the confidence. It is a real big key to good aim, but so is being chill. If you watch my gameplays again, you'll note that I'm pretty chill most of the time. Streams, sometimes I lose it a bit, but I like to be chill because it allows me to focus, and it does allow me to be confident. I don't try and think too much. I just try and be chill and just do it. And again, that's my advice. Try and focus on being chill and improve your mindset. It's definitely going to help you when it comes to aim. Also, just to add to that, personally, when I think too much about where I need to aim, I tend to aim worse. But if I just do things, if I just let my mind kind of figure it all out, more often than not, my aim is at its best. So to add to all this, my advice is also, just don't try and think too much about the aim. You've got to get used to the sticks. You've got to get used to aiming. So just try and just do it. Just don't let your thinking get in the way, because sometimes it does. I know, especially when it comes to sniping, if I just think too much about it, I often just miss so many shots. Whereas if I just go for it, I often play so much better. Now moving on to the third component of good aim, pre-aiming, or centering as it's often called. Pre-aiming is when you aim down your sights in anticipation of where the enemy may come from. Pre-aiming will often put you at a huge advantage against your opponent. You'll have the additional accuracy bonus of standing still. You'll be aiming down sight before your enemy is able to, and will likely see them first. But do remember, if you pre-aim at the wrong spot, you may miss opponents in the various blind spots on screen. Remember, your gun blocks a huge section of the screen. Keep that in mind when pre-aiming a spot, especially when you're looking out of a window. So when it comes to pre-aiming, as you move around the map, you want to be thinking about areas around the map where enemies could be and pre-aim at these spots. Pre-aiming is often called centering. This is where you keep your crosshair on the apex of the corner as you move around it. By centering, hopefully you'll see your opponents first, react quicker, and drop them much faster. By not centering, you could expose yourself to an enemy and get taken out. So what I want you to do to improve on your pre-aiming and centering is to try and pre-aim and use centering as much as you can. Not only will you be seeing opponents well before they see you, but by doing these movements over and over again, you're improving your skills with the sticks, which will greatly help when it comes to gunfights and being able to follow a target. I guess you could say it's kind of like training for a fight, if you will. If you're constantly centering and pre-aiming spots, you're using the sticks more, so you're training essentially. So hopefully, when it comes to an actual gunfight, hopefully these movements will have made you more precise and more confident with the sticks. So do try to incorporate pre-aiming and centering in your own gameplay, but don't limit the centering to just smooth movements. Try and sort of jitter your aim around the corner. If you watch my gameplay, sometimes the movements are super smooth, then they kinda stutter in places. You see, good aim isn't just about being super smooth all the time. You got to be smooth here and there, but in some situations, you'll need to adjust on the fly. So again, repeating these types of movements again and again should greatly improve your aim overall. Also, just to add here, when pre-aiming, the width of an enemy's head is a good place to start. Try that. You don't want to be too far out and you don't want to be too far in. I do think, you know, the width of an enemy's head is kind of the sweet spot, I guess. Now let's talk a little about gun control. This really does need its own video, so I'm going to try and keep it short and sweet here. The way I prefer to think of it is, how many bullets do I need for a kill, and try to fire that many? A good site to use to find all this info quickly is Synfic.com. Link is on the screen right now. On this website you can find pretty much everything about the weapons you can use in BF1, all the exact stats, and it's updated constantly. I highly recommend you check out that website. It is a little complicated, but I will cover more about that in a future video. But anyway, back to gun control. It is a massive topic, lots of information to look at, but the biggest thing that I often get asked is, how do you control recoil and why do you have so little recoil? To be honest, the reality is you just need to practice. All you need to do to counter it is by pushing the analog stick up or down, depending on the layout that you use. I will say though, one big mistake people make, I see so many people do this, is that they try and control the recoil for the entire magazine. Don't do that. If you haven't dropped your target by 10 bullets, you need to readjust and come back. In general though, tap for headshots, 3 to 5 bursts for most situations, and give your weapon a moment to reset itself. If you don't, the bullet spread is basically going to be all over the place. If you think about it like this, if you control your weapon, you're not firing all the time, the cone of fire will stay sort of around the center of your screen. But if you're constantly holding the trigger, the bullets are just going to go all over the place. Now the LMGs are a little different. I'll get into that on another video because it's quite a massive topic. What I do recommend though is jumping into an empty server, probably on one of the night maps or just a dark area of a map, lowering the brightness maybe, and having a play with the weapons you like to use and taking note of where the bullets go. To add to that, we could sit here, look at all the stats, but you know, if you can't manage to get a basic feel for the weapon, you're never going to be able to control it well. So I do recommend you try this out, let the weapon bounce, spray it, move while firing, try everything, try all the things, and hopefully after a little while, you'll get more of a feel for the weapons you like to use. Definitely recommend the Hellriegel for this because it's a fairly simple weapon, but if you go here, you can see how it really works. Now when it comes to sniping, do recommend you check out my sniping guide for all of that. But one thing I will say today, on console I much prefer to sort of drift my aim over a target rather than trying to be too accurate with the sniper rifles. I find it much easier. If you see this clip here, I drift over the target and this seems to work for me. You know, being super accurate with a sniper on console isn't easy, so this technique may be one you may want to incorporate into your own gameplay. Lastly, I'd recommend picking a crosshair color that isn't too distracting. This is all personal preference, of course, but I personally find a pink or purple crosshair works quite well on the night maps and a bright green or orange one for elsewhere. Try a few different ones and see which one you prefer. I'm being honest with you here, a crosshair can have a huge effect on your aim. You know, if it's too dark and you can't follow it, it's obviously going to affect your aim. And on the flip side, if it's too bright, it's going to be too distracting. But again, it's all personal preference. You know, some people like the ones that are super bright and you can clearly see them, other people don't. So you may want to have a go. You know, popular ones are bright green, bright orange, but there are people who like to have a black one or a dark red or dark blue, so have a play and see what works. Anyway guys, I hope you found this tutorial helpful. Please drop a like if you do. Obviously this is a massive topic and I need to cover it in multiple videos, but hopefully this is a good start. Anyway guys, I'll see you guys in the next one. As always, I hope you guys are all doing good. Take it easy guys, catch you later.